Hello, I'm Toby Hulse from Roustabout Theatre, and I'm delighted to be joined this morning by Kate Cross from the Egg Theatre in Bath. This is the first of our Lights Up On sessions, and first off, can we excuse any technical glitches, errors? This is all very new technology to everybody, but hopefully we've done a couple of trial sessions and this will go quite smoothly. For those of you who are concerned, who are attending this webinar, you won't be able to see yourselves, just myself and Kate. But if you do have questions at any point during this conversation, if you go to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little button marked Q&A. And if you type your question there at the end of our chat, we'll try and answer as many of them as we can. Lights Up On is a programme for GCSE and A-level theatre studies students, for emerging theatre makers, for aspiring theatre makers, and basically for anyone who's interested to know what goes on behind the scenes at the theatre. And we're meeting people in administration, we're meeting different creative people, and we're also meeting a number of technical people that support productions over the course of the next 10 weeks. As I said, I'm joined this morning by Kate Cross from the Egg Theatre in Bath. Hello, Kate.
Hello.
Thank you so much for giving up your time like this. I know for many people, what should have been a more relaxing time in lockdown has actually got more and more frantic.
Sure.
But particularly as we all try and learn new skills.
Well, that too.
Yes. So I wondered if I could just start off, for those who aren't familiar with the Egg Theatre, if you just give us a description of what it is and what its aim is and what sort of work it produces and puts on.
Yeah, the Egg Theatre is actually part of Theatre Royal Bath in Bath. It's one of the 3 auditoria at the Theatre Royal Bath, including the main house and the Euston studio. The Egg Theatre opened in 2005, so it's like 16 years old now. And it was converted from what was a cinema that was tacked onto the edge of the theatre sort of complex there, with the to be devoted to children's arts and theatre for children and young people, with, by and for. So at the heart of the building, there's an auditorium, a beautiful auditorium that seats 123 in really relaxed kind of sofa-like environment. There were no holds barred in terms of making that a really beautiful and embracing and kind of wow factor kind of space, beautifully designed. There's also a cafe and there's a rehearsal room on the top floor. I mean, obviously, if it was a bigger building, there'd be hundreds of rehearsal rooms and workshop spaces, but it just isn't. So in that auditorium in the centre of the building, we present plays for families, for young audiences, for teenagers, for school groups throughout the year. We're rarely dark. I mean, the building is open pretty much every day of the year. Our performances take place on Saturdays and Sundays, but quite often during the week as well. We tour in productions from around the country, but also from around the world. And we tour those productions in for about 40 to 45 weeks of the year. And we also produce work for a young audience. So we're quite rigorous in our approach with working with artists, some of them local, some of them national, some of them international, to make new and exciting and innovative work, theatre work for young audiences. And when I say young audiences, I could be talking about babies, I could be talking about under 5s, I could be talking about primary age children, I could be talking about teenagers. But the building also houses the creative learning function for the whole of the Theatre Royal Bath, a theatre school for 5 plus and including adults. So that's kind of regular sessions, regular performance opportunities for young people and adults every year. And we run the level 3 in performing arts with Bath College. So that's the 16 to 18-year-old performing arts programme. So we run that in-house with the college. We have an adult creative learning strand. And yeah, there you go.
Fantastic. And any of you who haven't been to the Egg Theatre, once we're allowed to go back to theatres again, I urge you to go. even if you don't have a young person to take with you, it's a magical and extremely creative experience to be in that building, and a very nice cafe too, particularly if you like playing in ball pool. So Kate, your job is described as the director of the Egg Theatre. The word director in theatre has many different meanings. What does it mean in your case?
Yeah, it doesn't mean that I go into a rehearsal room and direct actors in a play. I'm absolutely no good at that. It's a pretty executive role, actually, but it is also a visionary and strategic role. So to sort of break down those words, I would say that the visionary part of it, which is by far the most exciting part, is the bit that probably doesn't happen during working hours, but the bit that you can't help happening inside of your brain and your body, whether you're sleeping or, you know, cycling or doing your Pilates session or whatever else. So you're envisioning a kind of creative world for your sort of potential and imagined audiences in your head. You're trying to work out how the best way to put artists and young people together in a space, whether that space is actual or increasingly, whether that space is virtual or digital, in a way that enables those young people and those artists to really work alongside one another in creative and cultural and beautiful aesthetic ways. So that's the really exciting part of the job. And obviously, you know, when we built the Egg, a very large part of my job was being the visionary person behind the process of putting that project together. The strategic part of that is then, you know, making those crazy visions actually happen. And, you know, in order to do that, there are an awful lot of people you have to persuade. And that is, I suppose, the power of persuasion is probably something that everybody in the arts sector, if they don't have it to begin with, have to learn to acquire. I mean, first of all, you have to persuade your way into a job. And then once you've done that, you then have to persuade the people above you, the people who make bigger decisions that you have less control over, to buy into your ideas. If you're a very creative person, which I think I probably am, and you're having very kind of researchful kind of creative ideas, and the powers that be are much more market-led, money-led, pragmatic, if you like, or risk-averse, that process of persuasiveness is, you know, is a skill, and it's a skill that one has acquired over the years in order to enable your ideas to sit within the overall strategy of your bigger organization. And so sometimes that's being persuasive, sometimes that's typing, you know, composing fundraising applications, persuading funders to give you the money to do the work, or persuading audiences to come and see the work or to take part in the work, finding the right language, finding the right medium through which to communicate your ideas to the general public, and to you know, break down those barriers and invite them into your world. And so sometimes that's quite simply about kind of putting budgets together, you know, putting projects together, lining up the ducks, as we say, getting everything in the right order, not the wrong order, making sure that you've done your budget properly, in order to not over or underspend or scrimp on a project unnecessarily. That's my job. Oh yes, and also I suppose I'm an employer and a manager, so I manage a team of 10 people, and there are a number of different management styles that people can adopt. Interestingly enough, I find my management style is very similar to my parenting style, which is benign neglect. That is the kind of management style that pervades across the whole of Theatre Royal Bath. The idea that you are given freedom, free rein to take risks, to fail. We are allowed to fail. We're allowed to fail at the Theatre Royal Bath, and we're allowed to fail in the Egg. And because we're allowed to fail, actually, rarely we do, because not wholesale, because we are not, what's the word, singing to anybody else's hymn sheet. You know, we're kind of creating our own set of aims and objectives, what it is that we want to achieve. We're not trying to jump through anybody else's hoops. So as much as I'd like to think that, in managing those creative learning practitioners and the other producers and managers in the organization, I'd like to think that on a good day, I'm allowing them to be the best person that they can be in their job, and to do it without any level of micromanagement. Because as soon as somebody else comes in with this kind of authoritative, kind of micromanaging style, then it will cramp your style, your self-esteem will start going down, and all the rest of it. So some people think I'm too aloof. Some people would rather I was a little bit more nannying, but you can't win them all. So there's that. And so obviously with management comes some of the difficult things. If somebody's underperforming, how do you manage those people if they're underperforming, or if they're starting to display behaviors in the workplace that are not acceptable? You have to deal with some fairly difficult situations sometimes. And of course, you're also interviewing and employing people.
In a moment, I'd like to ask you a little bit more about those people that you employ. But before that, could you give us a brief idea of how you ended up being the director at Egg Theatre, and what was your path? I know that there's no such thing as a typical path in the arts, and anyone who follows these 10 interviews will begin to realise that there is no. It's not like becoming an electrician, where there's a very simple route into that, or not simple, clear route into that job. How did you end up as director of the Egg Theatre?
Yeah, I would like to think that my story is quite inspiring, simply because I'm not that classic kind of, go to university, get a good degree, come out, get a job straight away, brilliant interviews, work their way up the ranks. I mean, I really, really struggled, and I fought with a lack of self-confidence for many, many years. But I do think that I have achieved a great amount of success in the current job that I'm at. And so I think the inspiration comes from, I suppose, some form of tenacity and working until one finds the right place for oneself. So I did a degree in drama and theatre studies. I did a PGCE, a teaching qualification in drama. Had no intention to ever be a drama teacher in a secondary school because I can't stand bells. But I did want the facilitation skills. I kind of wanted to understand that kind of notion of, where arts and young people kind of coincide. So I think I was always fairly interested in that, what's the word, coming together of young people, their learning in its broadest sense. I don't mean their curriculum, I mean their developmental growth, and the role that the arts have to play in that. But then when I sort of graduated from those two spaces, we were going through a political climate where there was very little out there in terms of arts jobs. Unless you went to one of the big organizations like the National Theatre or the RSC, it was really, there was not a massive kind of countrywide ecology of small to medium-sized arts organizations. And I just couldn't find a job. It's simple as that, And then I discovered that I wasn't very good at interviewing as well. I prefer conversations. I don't like actually answering questions. I like to ask them because there is no answer to a creative person. So the notion that you're going to get the question right in an interview upsets me and makes me very wobbly. So I was pretty crap at that. Anyway, I did get a job, through the back door. Most of the best jobs I've had through not having to have an interview to go through the back door. So, equal opportunities, another whole conversation, because I'm not quite sure what we mean by equal opportunities. Anyway, nevertheless, I suppose I was a white privileged human being, so maybe that back door was more open to me than it was to others. So I worked in community theatre. So I produced 2 community plays, one in Purbeck in Dorset, and another one in South Somerset. So that just involved me, again, persuading local people who thought that theatre was not for them, who think of theatre as being something outside of themselves, to come together, fundraise, do lots and lots of PR together, and then all be in a play together, regardless of their experience, talent or skill or anything else. I did that for a while, and then I got a job as a community arts worker at an arts centre in North Devon called Beeford Arts Centre, which involved me driving around the lanes of Devon all day long, doing things like tea dances in village halls and summer play schemes, arts-led play schemes on the beach, and I mean all sorts of crazy nonsense. Another community play, yeah, community arts, so sort of grassroots generation of ideas with local communities. And then I left that and I was freelance for a while. I got very much into the play world actually. So I got hitched up with play training play workers in use of arts in their play schemes. And that sort of, you know, took me into lots of different avenues. And at which point, and this is where by now we're in the early 90s, the National Lottery had come on stream, and sort of lots of buildings were opening and kind of education spaces, and this whole new idea of an education department in a theatre or in an arts organisation started to come into fruition in a way that it hadn't really during the 80s. So I thought, oh, an education officer in a theatre, that would be nice. So yeah, as previously stated, I applied for lots and didn't get them, but eventually was lucky enough to get one at Salisbury Playhouse. So I was the education officer and then the head of education at Salisbury Playhouse. And then I was invited to the Theatre Royal Bath as a freelancer to do a little bit of some education work. And that, I got on really well with the director of the Theatre Royal Bath. I think he saw something in me, you know, that he liked, which was lucky for me, clearly. And that job sort of morphed its way into a full-time job, and then it morphed its way into head of education. And then whilst I was head of education, this opportunity to buy the cinema came on board. And that's when I started building up this vision to build the Egg Theatre.
That's, I mean, as we go through these weeks, we'll learn more and more extraordinary and varied paths into creative work. And I think that's the benefit of conversations like this. I'm sorry if this is an interview again, Kate. Maybe you should be asking me the questions. But
I am on my specialist subject, so it's okay.
Yes. Yeah, and you had no passes so far. But I think that's one of the things that's worth pointing out to people who are interested in careers in the arts, is that you can't map it ahead, can you? You're always looking for opportunities and following your nose a bit and following your instincts. And it's a fascinating way of working, but quite an unpredictable one. So you mentioned that you have 10 members of staff at the Egg that you are the manager for, and presumably they've all come in different ways into that organisation. Could you just give us a brief overview of the sorts of paths into working at the Egg?
Yeah. So the sort of office roles, if you like, the people that I directly line manage are the people who manage the various programs of work. So they either manage that college course, or they manage the theatre school, or they're a producer managing our artist development and producing work, or they're the manager of the Egg, so they manage the building and the flow of the general public through the building, or they manage the adult creative learning program, or they're just sort of administrating across the board. And so all of those people, or nearly all of those people, have got degrees, not necessarily in the arts, but they're not biochemists, but they could be, but they're not. They mostly did arts-based or humanities-based degrees at university. Some of them are trained teachers. One of them started off in journalism and moved across to theatre. One started off as a drama teacher and moved across into theatre. So he took a huge salary cut because he was the head of drama at a local secondary school. But he obviously felt the same way as me about schools. So he moved across to work with us. And we have one sort of artistic director. So we have like a full-time member of staff who's the artistic director of our theatre school. So she comes more from a practical director-led background. By now, quite a few of our staff have been through Bath Spa University because the sort of creative what's it called? The Performing Arts Department and the Creative Department and the Education Department at Bath Spa University have grown sort of exponentially in the time that I've been in Bath, so in the last 20 years. And so those young people are graduating and looking for work, you know, where they've been living for the last 3 years. A lot of them start off, however, so although they might have got the job through an interview, so through a sort of formal call out, you know, for a job and gone through the normal kind of equal opportunities procedures, they might be known to us already. And the reason why they would be known to us already is because they may have been, and here's where our casual staff start to come on stream, so they may have been workshop assistants. So whenever we run workshops with our young people or with our adults, we have 2 members of staff in the room. We have the practitioner, the artistic practitioner, who's a freelancer who we pay a fee to deliver that workshop, and the workshop assistant. And the workshop assistant is the person who supports that artist, does the kind of pastoral care, the admin, you know, signing people in and out, looking after people who need specific care, taking children to the toilet, you know, all that stuff. Everything that is needed, to, like a teaching assistant, to enable the artist to get on with the thing that they're best at, which is the art, the creativity. So quite a lot of sort of early stage practitioners, you know, it's what I would have done instead of going to do the PGCE in drama. I would have become a workshop assistant if such a thing had existed. I would have learnt my trade from all the freelancers who were delivering the sessions, and I would have gained confidence. And as I showed initiative and as I showed sort of reliability and responsibility, I would be either by that artist or by our team in the office, I would be given more and more responsibility to run sessions or to part run sessions or try out some of my new ideas on the participants. And so quite a lot of our freelancers, and we spend lots of our money on freelancers, by the way. So you know, one of the largest portion of our annual budget is spent on contracting freelancers to deliver all this work to our young people or whatever, to our families. So a lot of those freelancers used to be workshop assistants, but some of those workshop assistants then would apply for those bigger jobs in the office, and I would then employ them because they're great and they understand the egg. And so other entry levels are, and some of these people coincide. So of course there's a big team of front of house staff who are the ushers in the performances. Quite a lot of them are also workshop assistants. The wonderful thing about those front of house staff is that they probably see more plays per year than I do, and I see a lot. And you know, if they have any kind of intuition at all, what they learn from watching the variety of work, good, bad, and indifferent, coming in and out of the building, you know, really holds them in good stead for some future career as an artist, a creator, a theatre maker, or a producer, or somebody like me, or whatever. So as an example, Toby Thompson, who's an extraordinary local performance poet, we met him, first of all, when he was 12 years old, and he arrived at the Egg as a member of one of our youth theatre sessions. He was kind of shy, a bit of a loner, would sort of tinkle around on the piano, sort of riffing and sort of rapping and kind of spewing out extraordinary combinations of words and meanings. We thought, God, this guy's kind of interesting. He then begged his way into a front of house job. He then watched, you know, hundreds of plays. And then when we were running this artist development program called the Incubator, we invited him to pitch an idea for adapting a fairy tale in his performance poetry style for a production for young audiences. You know, we thought we'd do Hansel and Gretel or Little Red Riding Hood, but he chose an unknown story called Faldum by a writer called Herman Hesse. But we renamed it I Wish I Was a Mountain, and we produced it, and it went on to become actually a worldwide hit. So we were, before COVID-19, talking to about 12 different countries across 5 continents about touring that show. So I think that's a really lovely example of a journey whereby, without realizing it, we are sort of developing artists through them doing those casual jobs. And so a lot of those people also work on the desk. So we have a reception desk in the what is the cafe, of the egg, and they sort of, usually our manager works there, but when our manager's on holiday or when it's his day off or whatever, we have desk staff there, and they undertake a lot of admin, but they also are very, very face to face with our public. So they know all the members of our theatre school, they sign them in, they know their names, they know their parents, they sell tickets, so they're kind of quite multi-skilled actually. They're skilled up on the ticketing system, the security of the building, they lock it up at night, So those are some of the casual jobs that can sort of lead into some of the more permanent office-based jobs. Not to mention the technical department, but I don't actually oversee the technical department. That's the technical department's job. But there are also obviously casual opportunities there as well for skilled technicians, graduates.
Great. I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll be open to questions from the attendees. Yep. Before I do, I'd just like to underline what Kate just said there about becoming involved with theatres and becoming involved with venues as a way into learning your craft. The story that she described there of Toby Thompson is one I've heard a number of times from professional artists, that they started in youth theatres and then started volunteering. And if I were to say, give one piece of advice to anyone interested in working in the performance careers, would be become an usher. What you learn from being an usher, watching either the same performance over and over again and spotting the minute details, the minute changes that happen in our performance, or just the variety of work that you can see by being an usher, is extraordinary. It's a very, very valuable and enriching experience. My last question to you is very simply, and I think we've kind of covered some of it, if someone were interested in maybe taking over your job in the future, or working in this sort of executive director sort of role, what sorts of advice could you give them other than things you've covered already? Is there anything they should be doing or reading or studying or thinking about?
This is more like an interview question, Toby. This is where I start to stammer and falter, because I think, well, yes, there's loads of things, but I can't name any of them because my recall's really bad. But I think that to be good at this job, it's a bit like what I was saying about being visionary. There's what you do during your working hours, and then there's what you do just as a human being, really, being sort of hungry and interested and passionate about this area of work. So you sign yourself up into like a number of different arts organizations and newspapers and journals and, blogs and all the rest of it. And you read what other people are doing. It doesn't matter how creative we are as individuals, we are feeding off each other all of the time. We are magpies, all of us. We like to think we're original, but we're not. We're just sort of borrowing other people's ideas, kind of refashioning them and then calling them our own. And that's fine. That's what we're collaborative, social. Never have we realized this more, that we are collaborators. We feed off each other. We're like parasites. We need each other to have these fantastic, wonderful ideas. So you can't do it on your own. So you just need to sort of constantly delve around in whatever interests you, and don't read the stuff that doesn't interest you. Don't feel you have to read everything. don't feel you've got to sign up to every single arts organization, every single blog, and then read it just because, you heard somebody on an interview once say, read everything. Don't, it's like, just if it interests you, just follow it, follow your fascination and sort of dig deeper into the things that really, really fascinate you. I think what I didn't say when I was talking about my career path was that when I was doing that play work, when I was in North Devon and doing that play work training, I think that's when I became really political about children. And I developed what I would consider to be my sort of my politics of childhood, and, about the sort of patriarchy and how that it kind of imposes itself on children and young people, and, doesn't sort of acknowledge or respect the sophistication and complexity of their minds and the contribution that they make to our society on a daily basis. And so that kind of passionate kind of political driver, probably, stems right back to my childhood at school, is what has sort of, it's become my brand and my USP. So I think actually, as you travel through whatever jobs it is that you're doing, even if you're working in a cafe or working, somewhere completely outside of the creative industries, who are you? What's your brand? What's your driver? Everybody is unique. Everybody is unique. everybody has a unique story to tell that is absolutely interesting. Your story is interesting. Start with your story, and and then just really sort of build up that sense of brand of what you are. You won't always win. Doesn't mean that you're going to go to an interview and win it because you've got a unique story, but you will find your center and your core, and that will kind of steer you. You will always believe in yourself. So I think that is, what was your question? I kind of started to get
I can't remember the question, but it's a perfect answer.
But yeah, and then you'll also discover along the way skills that you don't have. And you can either decide, like I did, to employ people to do those things for you. And because now everybody's been furloughed, I'm really shafted because I'm doing things that I de-skilled myself in like 20 years ago. So this is, really good. So you can either do that or you can go and learn the skills. If you're a kind of skills-driven person, go and learn the skills. Just find some kind of training course. It could be something like IT-ish, or it could be more budgetary, or VAT, or stuff that bemuses you. But all of those different knowledges and skills are going to serve you at some point.
Fantastic. So we've been starting to get some questions in from our attendees, and the first is actually something that I was going to ask you about anyway. So I'm glad someone else brought it up. Phil asks, theatres across the country are facing challenging times. How can we help support the industry? And are you particularly concerned about the future of the egg?
Well, I'd be willfully naive if I said that I wasn't concerned about the future of the egg. But hang on, I realise there's two parts to that question. So how can you help? I'll come back to that. Yeah. So, but one of the sort of realizations I've had during this process, which I still feel like I'm in the firefighting stage. Everybody got furloughed. I pretty much got left on my own, doing all these skills that I de-skilled myself at. But I realized that actually nothing much has changed. That I think the reason why I'm in this work is because I like a good fight. There is a bit of a competitive spirit, which isn't about beating somebody else, but it is about beating yourself, having an idea and making the damn thing happen. And so the sort of that sense of tenacity and absolute kind of conviction that we will still have an egg at the end of all of this, however different it is then, is what gets me up every morning. So it's that fighting spirit, and I just have that. That's that persuasive thing I was talking about at the beginning. So it doesn't feel that much different. I've just got to keep winning, and it might be a harder, more hostile environment in which I'm doing this, but it's still the same kind of procedure and process that I'm going through to do it. So I'm going to keep fighting. To be specific about the egg, although we don't have Arts Council funding, we're not an Arts Council funded organisation. We are funded by the Theatre Royal Bath, and Theatre Royal Bath makes its money purely commercially. And the only reason why the egg exists is because the Theatre Royal Bath, in its producing commercial arm, makes surplus every year, and that surplus is spent on the egg. We are the sort of charitable activity of the Theatre Royal Bath. Well, it doesn't take a fool to realise there's no profit being made at the moment. So that's why I say, of course, I'm concerned. But I'm also quietly confident that we will win the fight. Theatre Royal Bath has no intention of losing the egg. We are firmly embedded across the sector. We were, despite coming from a relatively affluent organisation, we were successful with our Arts Council emergency funding, and that's because I think we are so rooted in the sector. We receive all these visiting companies every year who are themselves funded by the Arts Council, and we pay all these freelancers every year. So for us to disappear out of the ecosystem would be a dent, not just for ourselves, but for the whole sector. So I have a modicum of sort of confidence that eventually we'll get back on our feet. Obviously, we're having to really rethink how we're doing things. I'm having to get my head round virtual reality, augmented reality, all reality, apart from the reality I've lived with all of my life so far. And I'm having to, I'm having to think differently about how those artists kind of get in contact with the general public. So to try and answer your question about how you can help, just asking that question is, music to my ears. Talk about us, follow us on Twitter and Facebook, although of course our marketing person has been furloughed, so it's not as active as it normally is. But when things start to get back to normal again, come and see us, come and talk to us, come and see a play. For people who are, one of the biggest problems we had when we were functioning normally before the pandemic was that because we had defined ourselves so much as a sort of children's theatre, people felt awkward about coming to see the work there if they didn't have a child in tow. But really what we are is we're just like a burning kind of bonfire of creative practice and kind of contemporary theatre making practice. We work with some really quite extraordinary theatre makers from around the world. And so just because the work, the final product is something that is refined for a young audience, doesn't mean that if you're interested in the arts, you wouldn't find it interesting coming to see the work there. So just come and see us when we're there to be seen.
And again, I'd underline that. Some of the best theatre I've ever seen has been theatre for young audiences, and the best theatre for young audiences often ends up in the Egg. So I don't think you can go wrong. And also there's a wonderful sense of experiment. You're never quite sure what it is that you're going to see. Whereas if you go and see something in a mainstream space, for an adult audience, quite often you can pretty much guess what it is you're about to see beforehand. Theatre for young audience is very much more experimental at the moment, and this, as in literature for young adults, that's where the real growth in novel writing is at the moment. Similarly, theatre.
Because there are no, that means you'll get me going on my specialist subject here. But, the thing about children, very, very young children, is that they haven't sort of developed all these kind of societal ideas about what a story should be and what it shouldn't be. They are, their kind of taste hasn't been kind of classified. They do have taste. Children really do have taste. They like that and they don't like that. But that hasn't become part of their sort of cultural baggage yet, necessarily. And so there's an openness and there's a kind of artistic kind of openness in children that you don't get in adults. Now, obviously, we still have to get past the adults. It's the adult that brings the child to the theatre. It's the adult that introduces them to it. And it's the adult that afterwards kind of goes, that was a bit weird, wasn't it? The child, it was completely logical. So we have to just keep serving the child and managing the adult.
And very practically, if you're interested in supporting the Egg, if you go to the Theatre Royal Bath website, which is theatreroyal.org.uk, there are lots of ways that you can support the Egg and its work through this rather strange time. I've got a question here from Robin, who asks, what's your first theatrical memory?
I mean, not great. I was in the amateur dramatic company with my mum. Mm-hmm. So I probably used to go and watch her in plays in the local village hall, plays by, I don't know who they were by actually. They're sort of not plays that are in the normal canon. Although I do remember her in Inspector Calls by J.B. Priestley, and I do remember her in Blithe Spirits by Noel Coward. But the other plays aren't so well known. So really I was watching stuff, and then I used to be in the annual pantomime. But as a very small child, I remember, very, very small, I remember trying to articulate to somebody why, this is a very vivid memory for me, why I liked theatre best. And I remember saying something like, I just prefer it when the person's actually in the room. Then I don't like them when they're all flat. I like seeing, yeah, I just like seeing the person right there. There you go. And I was under 5 when I.
Yeah. This is feeling more and more like an interview now. If you weren't running the Egg, what would be your dream job?
Oh, I'd like to do something like really different. I'd be a dancer or something. It's not that different, but I'd like to sort of have had a skill as opposed to a disposition. But in reality, you know, I was never going to do that. But what would I do instead? Well, I have to say, I don't really know. I think I'm doing the only job I'm capable of doing.
And that's actually often the secret of a successful career, is finding the thing that it's the only thing you could possibly do. I teach actors at the Bristol Theatre School, and one of the first sessions that I have with the first years as they come in is, could you be doing anything other than acting? Because if you could, maybe you should think about that as a career, which is possibly not a great start to your 3 years of very expensive training.
Well, I think actually what you're saying is maybe you want to do that as well as acting, because acting is not always full time.
No, but there is the very greatest actors that I've seen and that I've worked with at the theatre school. You can't imagine them anywhere else other than on the stage, and you can feel them relax into that as they walk on the stage, and they've clearly found the thing that is their, not just their disposition but their skill as well. You know,
yeah.
Just lots of questions here. Okay, let's finish off with this one. If you met the theatre genie and they offered you one theatrical wish, what would it be and why? I'm really hoping there is a theatrical genie.
Well, I mean, other than just, you know, persuading more people to come and see the work, I think it's probably, I'm going to go back, sorry to be boring, I'm going to go back to that little comment that I just made about, you know, who am I making the work for? Am I making the work for the adults who are buying the tickets? Or am I making the work for the child who's having the ticket bought for them by somebody else? And it's understandable, but it's frustrating for me because I've like honed this idea of what a child's capacity is to watch something sophisticated and oblique. It's frustrating to have that child interfered with by the adult who is with them. I understand it, by the way, so I am not like slagging off the adult. That's why I need the theatrical genie. I need the theatrical genie to come along and say to the teacher, you don't need to shush them. You don't need to tell them to sit up straight. You can actually sit back and enjoy this show yourself. We're not expecting you to police the children or to have a known outcome at the end of this play. Theatre is not school. Theatre is not the curriculum. Theatre can't be tested. Theatre is not moral. It can be immoral. It should be immoral. It should explore the darkest side of ourselves. Don't be scared. Try not to knee-jerk. Try to feel how your child has responded and embrace it. That, I think all those things about that kind of brittle relationship between adults and children is something I'd like my genie to come along and magic away for everybody's benefit.
Thank you so much. Well, let's hope we find the magic lamp and that genie arrives. Thank you so much, Kate. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you, and there's lots of really inspiring things that you've said there, as I knew and hoped you would. These sessions have been made possible thanks to emergency funding from the Arts Council, so we'd also like to say thank you to them. And that funding has also enabled our theatre company, Roustabout, to produce other online activities. We have some scripts available for young people to download to perform at home. We're posting drama games and rehearsal games every fortnight online. And we've also just gone to the rehearsal process for a play which will be performed on Zoom. So we've actually written the play specifically for families to watch together over a Zoom call. It's actually about a Zoom call, so hopefully it'll overcome some of the glitches that are happening at the moment in this strange Zoom universe. Details of all of those can be found on our website, which is www.roustabouttheatre.co.uk. Also, we're hoping to develop a kind of online mentorship scheme for young people who are interested in working in the performing arts. So if any of you have questions about your career paths that we might be able to help you with, do feel free to email us, and hopefully this will be the beginning of a relationship between Roustabout and yourselves. Next week, I'll be talking to the extraordinary Nikki Miles Wildin, who's the Associate Director at Grey Eye Theatre Company. And if you don't know their work, I suggest you put their name into Google right now. Grey Eye, Graeae. Thank you all very much for participating, and thank you once again, Kate. Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye.